Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll call this joint town council special meeting and budget committee meeting to order, 6:30 PM Thursday, June 10th, 2021. Ms. Milton, roll call, please. Here. Here. Thank you. Please rise for the pledge. Okay, the first item on our agenda is acceptance and appropriation of a $2,500 donation from the John G. Martin Foundation to the Public Safety Commission for safety signage. I hope you all don't mind. I took the liberty of putting this on the agenda kind of last minute. It was a little bit timely, and I didn't think anyone will have any issues with it, so I wanted to make sure we got this done. As you're all, well, let me read the resolution. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution number 061021-1. Be it resolved, the town council accepts and appropriates a $2,500 donation from the John G. Martin Foundation to the Public Safety Commission for safety signage.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Appreciate that. It's pretty self-explanatory. We've got another various generous donation from the John G. Martin Foundation and Frank Lohman, who is one of their directors. Obviously, just they keep giving back to our community in a great way, and this is just another way for them to do that. It's a very substantial $2,500 donation for some safety signage to be put around town. And Sean, you can probably articulate a little more detail what exactly it is. But as always, greatly appreciated. And, the foundation is always very generous to the town of Cheshire. So I assume we're all good with it, and that's why it's here tonight. Mr. Kimball?
Sure. Yep. Just very briefly, I talked to Mr. Lohman 2 days ago, and I know the Public Safety Commission has been working on some ideas for signage specifically around the new ice cream truck law, Tristan's law that was passed. So this is going to support that effort for the 4 main public safety signs here in town.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Are there any questions or comments on this? Mr. Jenks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we just met last night actually and discussed this. And it's also, in addition to the signage, the Tristan's Law signage, it's also to pay for some additional signage at parking lots along the trail to remind people to lock their cars and don't be a victim kind of signs. So there are some metals, there are going to be metal signs, I think, in the parking lots. I think the location to TBD at this point, but part of the 2,500 will be going toward that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously of those that are here. And once again, thank you to the John G. Martin Foundation and Mr. Frank Lohman. Very much appreciated. We'll now move on to item 4, review and discussion regarding the proposed fiscal year 21-22 capital expenditure plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to our budget chair, Mr. David Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. And good evening, folks, and welcome as we have concluded the operating budget 2 weeks ago, and we have a deadline for questions to be set for the ballot of the end of August if we are to have referendum questions. So it's time that we get moving on our review of the various departments and their requests. Capital budget tends to be a little more slimmed down because it's less departments that have capital items, and there are certainly fewer items than we deal with in the operating budget. But nonetheless, they're very important, and this is a big investment we make in our community. And we're looking at significant dollars and a significant investment in all aspects of our community. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the town manager. I think we have 2 departments, Public Works and water pollution. Oh, so all the, okay. Public Works, all inclusive of George's areas. Okay. Very good.
Sure. And exactly. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And we will also be covering, it's kind of, Public Works is such a capital intensive department in general, and they have a broad reach to other program areas in the budget, including public property, a little bit in administration and finance when we have some of the recurring items, the general services accounts where we purchase some of the smaller vehicles. So there'll be some of that discussion as well. And with that, we'll probably dive right into Mr. Nowotny here, the Public Works Department presentation.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Good evening. Thanks
Good evening. Good evening. good to see everybody in person. It's and Mr. Walsh as well from afar. But thanks for having me tonight. I know we're kicking off the capital budget process with Public Works, which is just as well as Sean said, it's a pretty capital intensive operation. So I'll try to give you an overview of our requests and answer any questions, and we can dive as deep into these matters as you'd like. Obviously, I'll try to key on most of the first and second year things, but anything you want information on, please let me know, and I'll either give it to you tonight or I'll get it for you or whatever we've got to do. So if we want to jump right in on page 150 in the vertical book, that gives you, I'm going into the pickups and the grounds equipment first off. And that gives you the overall spreadsheet, which includes police, fire, and some other departments. And if you flip from there to 153, you'll see the Public Works specific request. And I'll give everybody a minute to catch up. The good news is there's no pickups in the first year, so we can kind of dispense with that. Mr. Kimball moved the one requested pickup for the treatment plant to next year, which is fine. We can certainly survive with that. So dispensing with that, on page 155 is the grounds equipment. And our request, if you flip over to 156, there's a spreadsheet on the back there. Our request for this year was an articulating utility tractor, a gator, and a trailer for obviously various grounds activities, snow removal, trail maintenance, open space, events, different things. In Mr. Kimball's budget, he moved the gator out to next year's, deferred it a year. And that leaves the articulating utility tractor and the trailer for the request this year. Again, which is fine with us. And in your packets, you've got a picture of the tractor. It's a Ventrac machine is the brand name that we're looking for. And it's a small multi-utility tractor, I'm going to call it, or multi-utility platform. In this case, I'm showing it with a snow blower because obviously we would use this in place of one of our existing Bobcats to replace one of the existing Bobcats we have that are 14 years old now, I believe, to do sidewalk snow removal in the winter. The good news with this, as opposed to the Bobcat machines that we have currently, is this has a number of attachments that can be rented or purchased or whatever. So you can end up with a broom on the front if you want to broom off the trail or sidewalks or whatever the case may be, or a blower attachment for kind of leaf blowing or I don't know what you call it, debris removal on the sidewalks or things like that. So there's if you go on their website, there's a whole host of attachments. So a vehicle like this would obviously have a multitude of uses in our department. So this and a trailer to tow it around is the request for this year. So unless there's any questions, I can move right along. Yes, sir.
Thank you, George. Just real quick, you talked about this replacing the Bobcat. Is this more efficient than what the Bobcat would be able to do?
Yeah, absolutely. The Bobcats are pretty limited. They're made primarily for snow blowing, the ones we have, or snow removal, if you will. So they're narrow track. You can't put much of a bucket on it, or it gets pretty tippy and that sort of thing. So this is much more stable platform and has a lot more attachments available for it based on the size of it.
And as shown, the snow blower attachment, is that the width of a sidewalk, basically?
More or less, yeah, correct. It's right in that range. It's also, you can get a plow for it, which actually for sidewalks, we found the plow is pretty handy as opposed to a snow blower. The plow, you can kind of, especially on the brick sidewalks, you can kind of keep it up and move things. But the snow blower we would get in the width of our standard 4-foot sidewalk, somewhere in that range.
And then for the $50K that you're looking for, does that include any of the attachments, or is that just the base unit that we see in the back there?
The base unit and the snow blower
Okay.
attachment for it. And
All right.
obviously we do the best we can, and if we can negotiate another attachment in or something, or we can certainly rent them as needed. They're pretty plentiful out there.
And then give me an example of, or some examples of, like, is this for schools as well? Would you use it for the, the high school, the loop in front of the high school with the sidewalks there and, sidewalks, in front of the like park and rec and, some of those things? Is
Sure.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't do the schools currently, but it would certainly take care of all the sidewalks in front of Bartlam Park, the Zentech property on the way to the trail, all around Town Hall here, all the town buildings. It could certainly do the multitude of work for that sort of thing.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Boylan. Just to follow up on Mr. Talbot's questions, George, is this predominantly just a winter vehicle? Because I know the Bobcats, you can put a bucket on it, you can use it all year round for various things. What else I know you mentioned a blower, but I can't imagine we're going to use a leaf blower too much on this thing.
We could on the trail. As it turns out, when we get these storms and you get sticks all over the place, and we have, I'm not going to say frequent, but it's not unusual to get calls for people who are worried about tripping on things, or bicyclists who, a limb that might not need a chainsaw but could be blown off or something like that. One of the big things, the better pieces, is a sweeper, like just a big broom on the front that would allow you to go down and knock off a bunch of things off the trail or any of those kind of things. But this, right now, the Bobcat is predominantly a winter use. This, I think, would be more of a potential for a 4-season use. The Bobcats we have are wheeled, and they're really narrow track, so they'll tip at the wind gust almost, it seems like, and they're just very narrow, so they're not any kind of uneven ground. If you put a bucket on it, you're testing the limits of it.
So we've got really small Bobcats.
We do, yeah,
then,
really tiny ones. Yeah.
Because I know some of the bigger ones are pretty versatile all year long. I just want to make sure that we're using, this is not just going to be a winter vehicle. It can be used for a variety of things throughout the summer as well.
Correct.
So it sounds like a sweeper, maybe the big vac blowers that they have that blow leaves or debris, as you said.
Sure.
Is there any other attachments that you can think of?
There's a whole host of them, and I'll be happy to send them to you in an email or something.
Okay.
They've got
Okay.
dozens of them. I don't know how, we're not going to probably use an auger or something like that, that kind of thing too much. It's
Yeah.
we've got other machines for that.
I got you.
But
I've seen these vehicles occasionally, and the people that have them seem to really like them. They seem to have a very good reputation as a quality vehicle.
yeah, I agree. A lot of golf courses seem to be using them now, and
Yeah.
I'll call it institutions like a college or something like that. They seem to be making their, as you say, inroads into those kind of areas.
Well, I certainly rely on your expertise more than my own, so thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, yes, Ms. Nichols.
Just for fun, this is beautiful. I like the color and it's great. Does the person who operates this have to have a special uniform that matches the color? And is that in the budget? I mean, those are pretty snazzy. It's not like an old dump truck. So I'm thinking we ought to be color coordinated.
That's right. It's in the Cheshire color too, predominantly red.
All right, thank you.
All right. So we'll dispense with the pickups and grounds vehicles, and we can move over, running right along to public properties, which starts on page 159 in the same book. And that gives you the overview spreadsheet. Again, I'll try to key on the projects that are mainly in the first year or bridge, the first and second year, but please stop me if you want to hear anything more detailed, and I'll be happy to go into it. I'll just touch quickly, the boiler replacement at the police station. The council funded boiler replacements at the fire headquarters annex and police station. It's kind of a package deal. And the intent was, that was 2 years ago, I believe. The intent was to replace them at the fire headquarters annex and do the design at the police station. So we're working on the police station design. The ones at the police station are in good shape. So this has just become a kind of a placeholder. We'll get them designed so that when the time comes, we can get them replaced. But this item you may see shift into out years as we go along if everything trends the way it is. They're certainly serviceable and seem to have a good life expectancy. The various town building improvements, we try to keep a pot of money available for emergencies. If you have a situation where there's a roof that starts blowing off a building or a boiler fails or something like that. And we also use it for kind of routine maintenance, if you will. So where the operating budget in years past might have been a little larger for kind of specialized projects, maybe making a bathroom ADA accessible or in a building, or tile replacement in a building, or kind of, I'm going to call it somewhat elective projects. We have gone to the capital budget to kind of to dip into those things. So we keep part of that money for an emergency fund, and part of it is just to kind of spruce up the buildings where we can and do some of the projects that are a little larger than in an operating budget concept. So that request is 75,000 this year, and I've requested an additional 110. Well, it got bumped to the third year, so we won't touch on that. The parking lot replacement at the senior center, that was a request I made for this year, and Mr. Kimball bumped it to next year, which again is fine. That unfortunately with COVID, that building hasn't been used a great deal in the last year, and we'll keep an eye on it. It's the parking lot is ending the end of its serviceable life, but it's still, we can get another year or two out of it. I don't think we're going to have any major issues in the next year. The roof at the police station, this is one probably about almost 10 years now. We did the front part of the police station. The Public Building Commission had a project where they replaced the roof on what I'm going to call the main entrance, the public entrance area. And this is just continuing that work. The building roof now, I have to refresh my memory, was from 1992, so it's about 29 years old, and it's starting to show its age. This is the kind of the back half of the administration building and going out over the garage that's in the back of the building. So it's kind of it is anticipated to be a sort of a 2-year project where we will replace as much as we can for $225,000 in the first year, and then we'll come back and let you know. But we certainly don't expect it to exceed 110 for the remainder, and that's just based on the square foot calculation and roofing costs and everything. So that's that. And then we drop down to improvements of the youth center. We're looking for a little bit of seed money to do some design at the youth center. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the bottom, if you're following in the chart. So $20,000 this year, and that would kind of get us a scope of design. It's a general freshening up of the youth center, and I know that building in years past has been there's been some thoughts about different uses. I don't want to say different uses, but how it's going to be used in the future and that sort of thing. So this would just give us a start to, if it's going to remain the way it is, to look at potentially air conditioning the big room in there, which is unair conditioned, the room that gets rented out, freshening up the bathrooms, which have not been touched in quite a long time, and some of the offices and tile and things that are just showing their age. So that's a request of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Well,
sorry.
I didn't know, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I had eliminated the planning, what, in a couple of spots, sorry about that, with some of these smaller items, I recommended using the project planning funds that we have. So I think we're still conceptualizing, doing some work there with COVID and some uncertainty about what maybe the future of that building would be if we possibly repurpose, and then the air conditioning of that large space. I think that's a conversation we want to have if that's something that the council's looking to do in the future. But for now, I think we're going to still be doing some planning using the project planning funds account that we have.
Good catch, Mr. Chairman. I'm just on a roll here.
Well, it was an easy one.
Anyway, not to belabor that. The next one down is the parking lot replacement at the police station. That's in year 2. Again, that parking lot is starting to show its age. It's from 92-ish, so it's getting to be 30 years old. And we'd like to we propose to replace that at some point in the next several years and get that tightened up and back to normal. And then second from the bottom is various roof replacements at Firehouse number 3 in the town hall. This is a new request, and unfortunately it's in year 1. We, at Firehouse 3, which is the South End Firehouse, there was an expansion of that building in 2008. So it's been about 13 years or so. And the roof on that building and the older section that it attaches to is starting to give up. So the seams have split, and there's been some minor leaks, surprisingly minor leaks for what it's showing on the surface, but it's starting to give up there. So we did a partial replacement with some of that emergency funds that I spoke of earlier last year, and we'd like to finish it off this year with a formal appropriation. This is combined with the roof on the town hall, which was approved last year for replacement. The issue there is that we can use an upgraded shingle that is hail resistant and is a physically larger shingle. I meant to bring the boards up for you, which kind of goes in character with this building for the size of it. And but that obviously has a delta nowadays that's an increased cost and everything, but it's a lifetime warranty, if you will, which we all know that there's no real lifetime warranty in anything. So it's somebody's lifetime, but hopefully none of ours. But at the end of the day, those two, I just married them together as a request so that the council can consider it. And that's the story with those.
Any other?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, one more. Got to flip the page. Thank you, Mr. Kimball. And the last one is a request. This is a parking lot paving at the library, which is adjacent to the White Oak Baptist Church. So it contemplates paving the parking lot there as part of a long-term lease agreement negotiation. So that's it for public property, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have.
Any other questions? Before we move, Mr. Walsh and then Mr. Jenks, I saw your hands at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, George, just a quick question. With the parking lot replacements, many of us who have driveways, we get them sealed every 3 to 5 years or so to prolong the life of the driveways. Do we do that to the parking lots, or do we just leave them alone? And I'm not saying a 30-year-old parking lot should not be ready for replacement, because I'm sure it is. But I'm just curious as to what kind of upkeep do we do on these parking lots?
Sure. Good question. For a driveway, like you say, a lot of folks seal it. I guess I won't speak to incur the wrath of the driveway sealers out there, but there's kind of conflicting theories on that, whether it rots the asphalt beneath it or whatever. But I'm not trying to go there. But on a large parking lot like we have, it's hard to put that on because you have a lot of turning, a lot of static turning. People are always turning the wheel and accelerating on it and things. So we pretty much leave them alone. We do crack seal them fairly regularly now. So and that's the key to any asphalt, is if you can seal the cracks up so the water can't get under the asphalt, that prolongs the life of it dramatically and is really cheap money.
Senior center parking lot.
The senior center is from when it was built, so that'd be 99.
Okay, so it's not as old as the
Correct. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Jenks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick question. I know that the plan is for the parking lot up for the Diamond Savings property. The idea is to use some recycled material, right?
Sure.
Is
Correct.
that what you also do in these other parking lot replacements, or is it just all new material?
We typically we strip off the old pavement and what's under them is usually pretty good. So that anything built in the last 30 years, there's generally processed gravel under it and that sort of thing, which is what you want. And then we put down all new pavement, curbs, kind of re-landscape adjacent to it and all that stuff. So we like you say, a dime savings, that's more of millings, just putting millings down to
Right.
keep the dust down, where these are formal parking lots that'll be striped and everything else.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Talbot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. George, if we can we go back to 153?
Sure.
I just for my own purposes, I want to walk through the pages because we did go kind of quick and there was some stuff that was moved. So 153, the 46K year one has been moved.
Correct.
And then 155, the 82 becomes just the 50 for the tractor.
50, yeah, right, 57, I believe.
7 for a trailer.
Okay, so 57 total, and it's trailer. Okay. And then that was fire, so on 161, nothing. The 162, you didn't touch on, the various building improvements. Are we still doing that?
Yeah, I did. That's the kind of the emergency fund that we keep, and that was
Down to 75.
reduced to
right?
75.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as
Okay, and then the 163, the 150 was moved,
moved to the second year, correct.
and 164, the 225 stays for the PD roof.
Correct. And the 110 in the second year moves out to the third year.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to focus on year one.
Sure.
The page 168, the 20,000 is going to project planning and operating out of the operating budget. And then the 171, the 180 for the fire roof and town hall.
Correct.
And the parking lot for the adjacent to the library.
Correct.
And that's, okay, that's where we are year one. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. That was a good review. I brought up a question for me. The police station, when we do the roof in two parts, is it not more economical? Do we get better pricing by doing it together as one?
It's possible. We just, there's some natural break points up there on that roof.
Hmm.
So you can, there's some parapet walls up there and you
Okay.
can kind of make a final termination without affecting the rest. And the leak, I don't want to say leaking, but the leaks that we have had, it's not leaking continuously, have been more in the administration side. So we're trying to buy a little time with as you go out over the garage in that area, if we can do some seam sealing up there and kind of, I don't want to say patching, but supplement the membrane that's up there. If we buy a few years, that would be a cost savings as well. So we're
Okay.
kind of working it both ways here.
Okay, thank you. I would also remind us that a lot of these items will be paid for with the $1 million that we set aside in the capital non-recurring funds. So a lot of these are smaller items that we've talked about so far. Coming up won't be such smaller items necessarily, but in your rest of your presentation. But so some of this is cash paid for.
Correct.
Well, and to that point, Mr. Barr, I think what we're going to be trying to do is make sure that we use capital non-recurring for items that don't have a long lifespan. We don't really want to bond something that is only going to last 5 years.
Right.
So I think that's where our discussion needs to be.
All right. Any other questions? Sensing you're ready to move on. Okay, George.
Moving right along. Page 188 is the next, as you said, this is the real capital intensive part of the budget. This is the Public Works itself. And we have two-page spreadsheet here. And again, I'll try to stick to year one as much as possible, but please stop me if you want to delve into anything. And I'll maybe Mr. Talbot brought up a good way. Maybe I'll just kind of flip the page and just go page by page as we go through here, and we can see where we're at. South Brooksvale Bridge over Willow Brook is in way out, one of the way out years. The first one that comes into year one is the Industrial Avenue culvert and bridge replacement, which is on page 191, the detail of it. So I know the council's aware of this because we came in a little bit of a panic over, I guess, in the fall. And when we had an issue out there with the wall, the retaining wall, and the tail wall and the head wall kind of showing some movement out there. And this is the formal request to do the replacement. We've had an engineering company go out, do a detailed estimate, and $860,000 is the number that's been used. The good news is that we qualify for 50% funding under the local bridge program, which will offset half the cost, or approximately half the cost, once the audit's complete. And that's the story. It's fortunate and unfortunate that this bridge is an industrial avenue where the council and the voters approved reconstructing that road. The good news is it hasn't been reconstructed yet, so that's the best news of all. The bad news is that's kind of delayed that work till likely next year when the culvert gets done, and then we can finish the road off over the top of it, subject to the council approving the funding for it.
Yes, George or Sean, I don't know that you have an answer for this, but maybe it's just kind of food for thought. Obviously, the federal government's talking about a big infrastructure plan, potentially a lot of money to be put into infrastructure. I don't know what that'll be. I'm not sure if you do, but should we be thinking about that as we're looking to some of these larger capital projects? Obviously, this is 50% reimbursed from the state of Connecticut, which is good, but to the extent we may be able to access, I'm not sure how they're going to roll those funds out, but I imagine it's something we ought to have on our radar. Looks like something's going to happen. And these kinds of projects, certainly I would imagine, would fit into that infrastructure bill if there is one.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. It's something we've been monitoring closely, and we're certainly waiting to see what direction all of that goes as it comes forward to the municipalities. I do think it's another good reminder of why having some of these queued up in a well thought out capital plan, as the council has done here for years, is great, because those are shovel ready projects. Sometimes we've had them designed, or we've had applications put forward for reimbursement, and then if you can get the balance funded through something like that, you're in great shape versus scrambling and trying to decide what to do. So it's a great point, and many of these could be great candidates for an infrastructure bill for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, George, thank you.
Sure, we'll move along. So the next one that comes up in year one is tree removals, which is one of the favorites. Oh, we're on page 192. I won't belabor this with too much talk, but I will say that the council's been had been at the very forefront of thinking in granting money in kind of regular tranches, if you will, over the years, especially with the Emerald Ash borer, once that showed up about 5 or 6 years ago in the state, to do selective and hazardous tree removals. And Don Nolte, primarily in my office, the engineering folks have made good use of that money in taking down trees, some proactively, some that were frankly hazardous. And we've made great inroads, and it hasn't required a huge capital infusion at once, like you can see if you Google through some towns in the state that kind of got behind the curve with that and had a lot of trees die all at once, and you're faced with a huge bill. So kudos to the council for having allowing the funding and having the forethought for that. And we're just asking, we have depleted the existing capital appropriation for this, so it was almost perfect timing that it comes up again in the budget. And we're asking for another 150,000 to continue that work. And Cheshire's a beautiful community and has a lot of trees, and unfortunately that costs a lot of money when you have to remove them out of the rights of way. And now we have the trail and the open space properties and everything else that will soak up that money. Unfortunately, the good news is we'll get rid of many hazards that are out there in the future, and that's good for everybody. But that's our request, is to pay for that work for another couple of years, hopefully. All right.
That's all right. That's okay. We're fine, Dave. I just had a quick question as far as, so if we go forward with this, would Cheshire Park, would the tree issues in Cheshire Park be taken care of in the next year if we were to get this fund, or if you were to get this funding? Or
Sure.
is that on the docket, so to speak?
It would come out of this work, out of this money. The issues we've had in Cheshire Park have been access related. So it's hard to get any kind of vehicle in there. There's some hangars. So we've
Right.
made detours, as I'm sure you've been in there. We've kind of made detours around some of the worst areas, but we would like to get in there and get them out. But unfortunately, short of climbing some of those trees, I'm not sure you can get in there, or building
Some of them are pretty large. Yeah.
building a road or something in there, which nobody wants to ruin that space by widening out a road either. So we're kind of hoping that Mother Nature is going to help us out a little bit in time, and we've tried to move the trails out of the way so that anything that falls will stay away from folks that are out there in the woods.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Moving along, the next one is the Public Works dump truck, which is on page 194 and 195. And this is a standard request each year. In this case, we're looking for a four-wheel drive dump truck. We have several of those in the inventory that take care of the more hilly section of town, generally Summit, that area of town, northwest side of town, and have a lot of hills, obviously, and that sort of thing. So this is a request to replace that truck with a new light truck.
Yes, George, can we just get a listing of the ages of the vehicles that we have and what this request would be replacing?
Absolutely.
I think we generally ask for it every
Sure.
year.
I should just put it in the budget by now. It's
And if you can put, I think sometimes we get miles, or if it's other equipment for
Sure.
hours.
Hours,
if we
sure,
can get that as
sure.
well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horace. Good catch.
Okay, the next one is Public Works vehicles, non-dump trucks. So these are the miscellaneous, I don't want to say miscellaneous, but I guess I just did. The other equipment besides dump trucks that we have. So in this case, the request on page 196 and 197 is a spreadsheet. And 197, we requested a loader, a bucket truck, and a chipper. The loader was moved out to the second year. So the request remains the bucket truck and the chipper for this year. And in your packets, there should be a picture of a proposed bucket truck that we've looked at. It's kind of like an F-550 with a small bucket in the back. It's not a full-on Eversource type of bucket truck. This is more light duty, certainly, but again, we try to do what we can in-house, especially with the storms that we've had. It seems like the last 2, 3, 4 years coming and snapping trees and damaging the trail and open space, not to mention people's properties. But this would allow us to get up there, get some of these hangars with our own forces, cut them down and reduce our reliance on contractors for that work when they're spoken for by many residents of the town needing their services. It also allows us to do things like hang the American flags on the flag poles out here or on the light poles out here for Memorial Day. Banners that go up for the fall festival or across Route 10 for various things. There are many uses for this, including light replacements in our parking lots or on the buildings, gutter cleaning on buildings that are inaccessible largely in places, specifically this building over in this corner, which is probably 80 feet high over there or something. It's a pretty good drop. And that sort of thing. So it gives us a truck that can provide a wide variety of uses. And I put together kind of a spreadsheet of similar costs that we've spent in the past, and I'd be happy to send it out, or I'll just kind of give you a brief overview. But we've spent probably $30,000 in costs over the last year or so in similar type activities mainly for tree removals. And I have to caveat that by saying the last couple of years have been a little crazy with tornadoes and windstorms and everything else. So, but it's not unusual to rent any kind of lift or anything like that for a few weeks. You can get to $1,800 without batting an eye. So one of these kind of trucks that has a life expectancy of a long time because it's not being used in the winter or exposed to plowing or anything can last a significant amount of time for us. That's for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So George, the year one then is 205. And is there any thought given to, similar to, what we do with our vehicles and put them on state surplus and we sell them that way? Is there any thought to looking for, because it's not going to be used during the winter, to getting a bucket truck from utility companies or something, getting something used? And
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. For this kind of truck, which is not I'm going to say a first line truck, we could certainly try to source it out. That's not a problem at all. And anything we could find that's serviceable would be a huge gain for us. That's
yeah,
for sure.
I don't even know if there's, I don't know if the companies, pretty much do like we do, run them until they're, non-usable, but, sign companies use them, and there's a lot of, operations that do use bucket trucks, and I don't know if they're, but it's worth looking into to see if we could get something for a lower cost that isn't new.
Sure. And that's a great point. And absolutely, we can definitely do that.
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Orris?
Yes, thank you. I think Mr. Talbot's idea is a good idea. It's worth looking into for the reasons you suggested. The other thing, I'm glad you brought it up, George, was for me, I'm looking for a kind of cost benefit analysis. So if you can put something together that, obviously if it's just the last year, we know that's an extraordinarily heavy tree year for us, but if you can kind of go back and just do what you can to me, this is not a necessity. So, for the taxpayers' benefit, I think we need to show them that there's a reason for us to own this versus us hiring out when we need them. I know there's a convenience factor that when you have the vehicle, you can get out quicker than you may relative to waiting for somebody. But beyond that, I'd like to see some semblance of a cost benefit analysis.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And like I say, my crack folks have put together a great spreadsheet here, and I'll be happy to share.
Well, I ran into one of your guys, and we were talking about this. I said, I'm sure the council's going to be looking for it.
Yeah. He relayed
So I'm
that
sure
to
a
me.
little birdie whispered in your ear on this, right?
Absolutely. That's why it's in color and everything.
I like it. Beautiful. The other question I have for you, George, is the 1997 loader that you're deferring. It's getting old, and obviously it loads our trucks in the wintertime. I mean, we're not doing a lot of site work off I guess our compound over there. But, are you okay with pushing it out? I mean, that vehicle looks like it's starting to get older, and I guess I'm trying to figure out which is more important to us or to you. Is it the aerial bucket truck or replacing that loader?
Yeah, it's a great point, and the loaders, I'm told the loader's in serviceable condition. So although, like you say, it's showing its age, but it still works well. And the good news is there are 2 other loaders at the garage, so we can get by with it.
So you do have some backups.
We do
if,
have
God
backup,
forbid,
sure.
it goes down.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, George.
Other questions? I actually have one. I noticed we have a good bit of John Deere equipment. And my limited understanding of some of that is they have a lot of the items that you wanted to get with that new vehicle. Would it make more sense to keep with the same manufacturer so that it's our people are familiar with with how they're working and with maintenance and things like that?
It's a great question, and the short answer is yes. It does help for sure, because all these vehicles nowadays have software. Even the simplest thing, it seems like, have software and upgrades that need to be done, and you have a laptop that you plug into all of them. So even for that, and just parts stocking and everything, it's great to do it. We can't always do it in a municipality because of obviously bidding kind of restrictions, if you will. But John Deere seems to be on the state bid, the DAS bid, pretty frequently as the low bidder. So we definitely try to standardize where we can.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, all right,
Sure.
move on, thank you.
And I'll just put in a plug for the chipper, which I didn't speak of. Our old chipper, which was used extensively in August, September, October, when we did the pickup, the curbside pickup from the storm. That's pretty well on its last legs after that stint. So we'd like to get a new chipper, obviously, to take the load off, and that gives us two functional chippers for future storms and just regular use. Yeah, it takes a larger size tree than the old one.
Yes, Mr. Orr.
Yeah, my apologies. I was just thinking about as you were talking, George. What is the turnaround time on these dump trucks? Because I know we were having some issues with the bodies, getting the
Right.
body put on the truck. Has that kind of resolved itself? And if we approve this, is it going to be reasonably quick turnaround to get it, or are we waiting a year or two again?
The last one we got, when it was approved in the summer, we got it at the end of the winter. So right towards the end. So it's still a 6, 7, 8 month delay, it seems like, but it's not, it was much worse several years ago. You'd wait almost a year, it seemed like, to get them. But there's only so many body companies out there, and the manufacturers make those chassis in kind of a batch, and then they seem to go dormant for a while. So we try to get in the queue as quickly as we can, but we're fighting the state and everybody else for those trucks.
Gotcha. And I know on the regular cars and stuff, the manufacturers are not getting them as they were.
Right.
I think there's a chip problem. We've probably all read about it, but are these vehicles readily available, or are you seeing some of the problems that I see that the dealerships around here are having? Their lots are not that full. I know I have a friend in the business who's struggling to get cars from the manufacturer because they're just backlogged. They can't get them out fast enough. So just curious what that process is for you.
Sure. We pretty much order them so that they're not on a lot generally. We get the cab and chassis, and then it goes to a body company and gets built up from there. So the cab and chassis in the past has been much quicker than the body, but I'm concerned this year that we're going to, with the chip shortages and all the other stuff, that could play a role in delaying the whole process.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about too. Okay, thank you.
Questions or comments? Thank you. All right, George.
All right, keep it rolling. The next is the road improvement program, which, pardon me, is obviously I guess the biggest expenditure we are proposing, $2 million for next year. This is again similar to all the other years where we do a mix of mill and pave, chip seal, micro seal, crack seal, and associated curb replacements and handicap ramp replacements and all the pieces to the roads as we repave and put them together. So that gives us the magic 10 to 12 miles of of treatment. I'm going to say, I can't say paving because not all of it's paving, but 10 to 12 miles of treatment of the roads. And Cheshire having 153 miles of road, we want to try to get, close to 10% a year doing something to it so that we don't have roads that go long times without some kind of treatment or overlay or crack seal or anything else that we need to keep the water from going under the pavement and shortening the life of these roads. So this is that request, and I'll just make a pitch for, we're finding as we're getting into some neighborhoods that the concrete curbs we're having a pretty tough time with. We're up in Payne and Redstone right now, which are on the list for the fall. And those curbs, while they're serviceable right now for what they are intended for, to kind of keep the water in the street, they're kind of cocked in places, and they've been scoured by plows over the years and different things and chipped. So we to replace those curbs, the full depth concrete curb is a huge proposition in dollars. So we're trying to patch them where we can, or kind of they make a concrete curb that's similar to an asphalt curb where you can kind of put it on top of the pavement as opposed to digging down alongside the pavement. But we're finding that those costs are just going to go up as we're into those kind of formal subdivision neighborhoods that were done probably in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, something like that. Much different in character than a road like Cook Hill or Summit or West Johnson, or one of the types of roads with asphalt curb and that sort of thing. So that's one of the big costs I'm seeing that are coming down the line, and we'll do our best to mitigate it, obviously, and do what we can. But it's out there, that's for sure.
All right. Questions and comments, Mr. Belliver? Do you have?
I do.
Okay.
George, quick question. Obviously, I'm curious to see now, a year or so later, what, and I see you don't have any listed here as possibilities. What happened with the repair and replace process that we started last year with the hot pack, in place? What happened? How did that work out? And is that something that's still on your agenda, or it doesn't seem to be planned going forward?
We haven't planned any this
I
year,
forgot what
that's
it was
for
called.
sure.
What was it
Yeah,
called?
Hot in Place.
Hot in Place.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did Oak. Oak is the famous area where everybody, I think everybody's driven over Oak. The good news is, Mr. Kimball and I were talking earlier, it's kind of knitted back together as it was promised, after all those dump trucks had run over it in the 90-degree heat, which didn't do us any good right after it was freshly put down. But we don't have any plan for that right now. That was a kind of a trial run for us just to see what it was all about, and it does work well in certain cases. But one of the issues is you need a good straight run of road. You can't really have any curves in it, and we don't have in Cheshire. We don't have a lot of those roads. A lot of our roads have a curve, and once you hit any kind of a curve, the process is the complexity goes way up. So we haven't proposed that. It's certainly a cost saving measure, but we feel like you can double a chip seal a road, which almost looks like pavement when it's done. It's a kind of a very fine chip seal on the top, and we use a Cape seal on the top, which is like just kind of a black sealer that goes over it. It almost looks like it's been repaved to some degree, and that's much cheaper than Hot in Place, and seems to get us just as good a product, if you will. So.
Well, thank you. I was just curious to see what I knew that we'd had some issues there, especially on Oak, but I wasn't sure going forward. It seems like you're sort of putting a hold on that for other projects, at least until we see it, maybe have either roads that are better, suited for that, but also maybe see how some of these roads hold up that we did already.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Belliver. Ms. Nichols?
Yeah, I would like to commend you on the jobs that you do on the roads that you're changing. And this is just simply a comment about that. We keep our roads in very good shape. I was on Wallingford Road yesterday, and it was thought-provoking because when I moved to Cheshire, my property line went to the middle of a road that was barely 2 lanes wide. And it was the original road to go from Cheshire to Wallingford, obviously, as it was spoken. It was not it was paved, but it was not wonderful. And now I get on that road and I understand where the problems are sometimes with the traffic, because when we moved there, it was a very narrow road, and now it's a very safe road and very well maintained. And the yellow lines took me back when I went down that bright yellow lines. But you do a great job. I just want to thank you for was the least intrusive for the residents who lived there. I mean, you handled it very well. So
Well, thank you. And I'll pass that on to the folks that deserve the credit. There was a lot of hands in that one.
Other
Sure.
questions or comments? Mr. Orris?
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, I agree with what Ms. Nichols just said. We do a phenomenal job. You know, we all travel many other communities, and I'm not going to pick on any other community other than say that I think Cheshire does a great job with its roads. And I think it pays real dividends, not only to the taxpayers that are here to drive them every day, people traveling through, but I think it's really good for all of our property values. So it's money well spent, in my opinion. We've done a really good job of doing it appropriately for a number of years with your rating system. It's done methodically. There's a system to it. It's not just random. It's not, you know, Rob Orris calls and says he wants his road paved. He's not getting it paved unless it's on that rating system or anyone else. So it's done methodically. It's done the right way. And as Ms. Nichols said, you guys do a really good job with it. I commend you on trying to use some other products that may work. Some do, some don't. I think, you know, the other issue I would say about Oak Ave is I drive it often. Aesthetically, I don't like it at all anymore because it's what happened there. You know, you got kind of drive lanes that are one color, and then it almost looks like it peeled off. And I'm just not a big fan. I think whatever happened in Oak Ave, well, you're saying it came back. I just don't see it. It's not something I have a whole lot of faith in going forward, Rob Orris personally. But so I'm glad to hear that you're not doing more of that this year. But I do think the chip seals worked it, and obviously our paving. So I'm going to support this line item to some degree. I don't know what it'll be. We'll end up talking about the final number, but glad we're doing this. Thank you. Sorry.
No, thank you. I have, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you saw me there. George, I know you mentioned that you try to do 10 to 12 miles a year to cover roughly 10% of the roads. How do you determine what needs, you know, chip seal, micro seal, crack seal versus a complete resurfacing? And I'm assuming the complete resurfacing is the most expensive of all of them. Like, I'm just curious. You try to fit within the budget, saying, okay, well, these roads we can afford to do, you know, crack seal versus chip seal, and these ones are going to be completely redone.
Sure. There's obviously a whole methodology to this, and we could spend till midnight and more talking about it, but I'll try to give you the brief version, the George Nwantny version. I'll kind of go in from the least intrusive to most intrusive. So crack seal, everybody's seen that where they spray a sealer over cracks. We tend to do that on roads that are fairly new. So every road develops cracks in the first 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there. And if you can seal those cracks up early on in its life, you can extend the life of that road dramatically. So instead of being a 12 or 15-year road, it might be a 15 or 18-year road or something like that. And every year you buy out of a road is a lot of money, because to mill and pave a mile of road is about $250,000. So it's every year of its life is worth quite a lot of money. When the road deteriorates to a point, and usually it's in the 80s range on our rating scale of 100 to 0, and somewhere in the 80s, we look to possibly micro seal it. So that's kind of like, I think, I forget who asked the question about the kind of the driveway sealer, but that's like an industrial driveway sealer for a road. You can't have a lot of cracks in the road, because you've got to crack seal the road first, seal up all those cracks before you spray down the seal. So that might be in the road's 8 to 10 year lifespan, and that usually gives you another 8 to 10 years on the backside, somewhere in there, in the 8-year range, I'll say, just to be safe. After, if it goes further than that and degrades into kind of the 70s range, we looked at chip seal it. So that again is a system to seal up the road, seal a crack so the water can't get through. But instead of crack sealing the road first, we spray down this industrial mastic kind of tacky sealant, and then you spread chips over it, which everybody loves. I know when the minute we do that, I know my phone rings off the hook, so I know exactly when that's going on in town. But that's a tried and true method to seal up roads, and they can have a lot of cracks under the chips, but that procedure seals them up nicely so that it keeps the water out. And then once the roads deteriorate kind of in the 60s, 50s, you've got to mill and pave them at that point. And that's obviously a big expense. So we try to do that sparingly. Usually we do about 5 miles a year, somewhere in that range.
That was going to be my next question. So you do about half the roads you do are going to be complete mill and paving.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks, George.
Sure.
I also had a comment regarding the chip seal because I talked to a couple constituents that asked maybe we consider doing that one because it's difficult for kids to ride their bikes, for people to walk dogs if there's not sidewalks. So maybe one of the criteria be a road that gets chip sealed might have a way that people can get around, and a lot of people are walking more so than ever
Yep.
nowadays.
Sure.
And if it's difficult and messy to do that on a chip seal road because cars don't flatten it all out and do that on the edges because they don't drive right against the curb, and that's where people would tend to walk. So that's where it creates issues. And I've had that brought to my attention. Hasn't been done on my street, so I can't say I have personal experience, but it makes sense what they said their concern was.
Sure, absolutely, and that's a good point, and we do try to do that. The normal chip seal, which you'll see on like a Higgins or Cook Hill, we've done in the past, different kind of through roads in town, is a different animal than the double chip that we've started to use in some of the neighborhood roads, which is a much finer chip on the top, which is less abrasive, I would say, as you walk over it. It lays down a lot better than the single chip seal. The single chip seal is great because it's a lower cost and a highly vehicle traveled road. It pays big dividends, but in a neighborhood, we try to use that extra layer of chips to kind of give it a more uniform appearance. And
I could
everything
see
else.
why the finer stuff works better too,
Right.
because it's not as difficult. All right.
And with a sweeper, which the council purchased for us several years ago, we're able to sweep those chips off a lot quicker too. In the past, we didn't have a sweeper, so we kind of had to rely on cars to blow them off, and then we'd sweep a couple weeks later with a contractor. Now 48 hours later, we can get right out there with a sweeper and get the excess chips off, which is a big help for a lot of the residents.
Thank you.
While you're on that, how is that machine working? It's been everything we thought it was?
Yeah, it's excellent. We've had very few issues with it, and it just finished sweeping the entire town again this year, and we're very happy with it. Thank you.
I wasn't sure how reliable those are. I know some are, some aren't, but I know it was a good acquisition. I see it around a lot, so I'm just curious how reliable the machine is. It sounds like it's doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. It's been great, and we have some really talented operators too who can. It's amazing to watch them. They can really hug the curb in places and go around obstructions. It's quite an operation to see.
All right. Other questions or comments? Okay, we move on to sidewalks.
Sure, sidewalks. So on 199, this is our just kind of plug number for sidewalk maintenance. We changed the name this year to delineate it a little more. It used to be Sidewalk Improvement Program, but we called it maintenance because it's mainly to maintain the network that we have, correct trip hazards or spalling sidewalks, that sort of thing. We don't really do any extensions or any measurable extensions with this. We'll do handicap ramps in places, that sort of thing. So we're asking for $250,000 this year, and we'll try to use it judiciously as usual. And some of this money will go to offset the sidewalk replacement on Highland Avenue that the town received a 50% state grant for out by the the prison in front of the rehab facility there. And we'll use some of that and replace those asphalt sidewalks hopefully later this year.
Questions or comments on sidewalks, Mr. Jenks?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So are there areas, other areas that are kind of targeted for this improvement this year for sidewalks? Do you have areas in mind?
As far as extending the sidewalks or
No,
just
as far as just the improvement part, the maintenance part.
the maintenance part, we're mainly, we don't have a long length at this point that we're looking to do, but we've got a lot of trip hazards throughout town, and we're going to try to really key on those this year and get a lot of those sealed up before the winter. So we've got a couple of specific sidewalk appropriations that will extend sidewalks in places, but right now we're not planning to do a big long stretch with the existing money.
Right, okay, thanks.
Mr. Veliver?
Thank you, George. So right now, the only big project that you have is the Cheshire Street project. That's what then that's obviously the next page here. But as far as what you contemplate this 250 for is stuff to just get done, that, projects that you have done. There's not a big project included in this 250 that you already have set aside, correct?
Other than the Highland Avenue,
You're right.
where we got the grant, that's probably the one big section, but.
And
that
you think that
bridges.
keeping up to just the projects you have to do will use up the 250?
Yeah, we've got a balance in some of the past accounts, but it's amazing unfortunately, factually, we have to use contractors for a lot of this stuff because it's just small scale things that you have to just hop around for, and you have to get it done because you can't leave sidewalks just opened up for the public to trip on or anything. And it goes quickly. We have some good contractors we work with, but by the time you replace 4 panels here and 6 panels there and a section across a driveway somewhere else, it takes it out of it pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Ms. Pavano?
Thank you. George, since you have to deal with the ADA compliances on the sidewalks, do we get federal or state money to help with this? Because they're pretty strict with their compliance.
Right, yeah, there are some LoCIP funding that comes from the state every year, but not directly that I'm aware of that go to this. It's to my knowledge, it's kind of an unfunded mandate, but the state does mandate that when you pave in front of a sidewalk, that the ramps must be up to
Right.
current ADA spec and everything else.
Unfortunately, the state does a lot of unfunded mandates, which really puts a burden on towns. Thank you so much.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. Hey, George, do you have an idea of when the Highland Avenue sidewalk replacement is going to start? I know this had been brought up last year, and I know we get the grant. And I believe we were waiting to see if the state was going to do any of the, like Ms. Panos just said, some of the handicap crossing areas. But I think they've already been past that area, and I was just curious to see when that might start.
Yeah, correct. Our plans are at the state right now for approval. So once we obtain that approval, we'll try to move forward quickly. So my hope is later. I always overpromise, but by the fall, certainly we'd like to have that done. And as soon as.
I just had a couple people asking. I just wasn't sure what to tell them. So okay, so I'm going to tell them. So now I said fall. If you have a problem with that, they should call them.
That's right. Yeah. That's
And just to be clear, on the part of Highland, are you talking about in front of the fields there at the prison, not extending it down to where it would go as far as where there aren't sidewalks now in the
Right.
northern part of the prison property?
right. We're going to be
Just replacement.
in front of the nursing home there.
Right.
And up contouring. Yeah, contouring.
Oh, this is the grant we
Yeah.
received already.
Right. This is. the
Oh,
grant
I
we
thought this
received,
was
yeah.
an extension because that's only going so far.
Right,
I thought
correct.
this was going to, because in front of the prison is pretty bad too.
It's that's another area that definitely needs to be replaced, but
Yeah.
that's a big number, and we maybe, as Mr. Orr said, maybe some of the federal infrastructure money could be used for that, because that's going to be a large number just for the run of it. It's just a lot of feet
Yeah.
there. So.
Okay. All right, thank you for the clarification. Any other questions or comments on sidewalks? All right. Drainage, right? Oh, no, Cheshire Street.
Yep, Cheshire
Yes,
Street
we-
sign. So bringing up Mr. Veliver's other point, and this is on
And that's the map.
page, oh,
Where did I see that map?
200. Right. So, yeah, in your packet, we just completed we had an engineering firm just complete a survey of Cheshire Street to kind of give us an idea of how the sidewalk would align out there. Well, first, I'll go into where right now the request is 170,000 for a sidewalk that generally goes from Worden Circle up to North Pond. It obviously has to kind of skip sides of the road eventually to get from one side to the other. But and there's been some discussion about increasing that, or going the other way south on Cheshire Street from Worden Circle down to Sindel, if that works out. But going to the drawings that you have in your packet, it's 2 pages. It covers a section from Worden Circle to North Pond, and it's a very busy drawing, and I won't belabor it. And there's a kind of a stylized sketch also along with it. But it kind of gives you an idea, a sense of the right of way, and what the basic takeaway from this is that the right of way on the east side of Cheshire Street, as you get close to North Pond, gets really narrow. So probably not a great place for a sidewalk, even though the North Pond sidewalk kind of stubs out onto that side of the road as it comes out. It would require purchase of some property potentially, and a lot of the houses are very close to the road on that side. So the sidewalk probably best fits on the west side where there's plenty of room in the right of way. And that would mean at some point you've got to skip sides of the road, whether it's at North Pond itself to get down to Quinnipiac Park, or however you do it. There's several ways to skin the cat. It's a little unfortunate that there's a sidewalk at across from Mark's Place on Cheshire Street that exists kind of in front of Carriage House Commons over there, that you could certainly tie into depending on how you use it, but it'd be difficult to go from one side of the street to the other and then come back into Quinnipiac Park. It's kind of, from a cursory view, it's almost not a great alignment for a sidewalk to be used for the purpose we're proposing. But we'll obviously have to study this and do some checking of how the utility poles conflict and anything else. Grade, there's not a whole lot of grade changes out there, but just make sure the grades work out, or anything else that could potentially be an issue. Legitimately, this isn't going to happen this summer for sure. So we'll keep you apprised. If we wanted to extend the sidewalk, we could certainly look at going down to Sindel. And the best use at this point might be just to get some funding to do the design, and then come back to the council and put in a real good number for the funding and take it from there. So that would be my proposition at this point, since we're looking to expand the scope a little bit.
Questions or comments? Mr. Orris?
Mr. Jinks.
East down to Sindel is something that I had noticed. The south of Worden Circle, the sidewalk extends about 50, 60 feet. And then from there, it's about another 500 feet or so to get down to Sindel. And Sindel is the access to the Quinnipiac, Meriden linear trail. So you have, my comment was that it'd be a shame to do this project and not also connect to that, to Sindel, because all these people in these neighborhoods would then be able to walk on a sidewalk all the way down to the trail, more or less. So in terms of our kind of desire to, create projects that have that kind of connectivity, that seems like a good idea there. But I also had a question too, George. You were saying that the piece up on the North Pond is too narrow up near there, east of North Pond.
Yeah, as you go as you're up near North Pond on these surveys, that probably an eye test at the size paper you're using. I'm getting older because my arms are not long enough. But the right of way necks right down to the road. So Cheshire Street's an old alignment, back from way long ago. And it's not our modern subdivision roads are laid out with a 10 feet of right of way on each side of the road, and you can bank on it. This road is kind of crammed into one side of the right of way that's there. And so the west side has a nice amount of right of way. The east side, as you go towards North Pond, is almost right on the street. So, to try to bring that sidewalk down the east side of Cheshire Street going towards Black's Road from North Pond to Black's Road would be fairly difficult. You'd either end up, in the best case, with no green belt, the sidewalk would be right on the street, or you'd have to talk to the adjoining property owners and try to work a deal with them to acquire property to
So
run
you,
the sidewalk.
we can't steal some space from the road there? I mean, isn't that a way to do that or no?
You
I mean,
could,
obviously you'd be narrowing the travel lanes a little bit, but it's also in an area where we want people to be going slower, right?
right. It's and it's a good thought. It's a fairly narrow road already,
It is a little,
unfortunately.
right.
And that's a kind of a well-known straightaway there. So people pick up a lot of speed as they round that corner by Mark's Place and on through Ives Farm and everything else. I've been several times by Mr. Kimball.
And then one more question too, sorry. If we do have to do the sort of your crossing from one side to the other, obviously we would be adding some crosswalks there, I guess, and those kind of enhanced signalized crosswalks we have now.
Sure, those,
That'd be-
high intensity beacons, we can,
Right,
yeah,
right.
sure. And that, we could try to, again, we have to study this a little bit, but you want those crosswalks, obviously very visible, so in a straight section of road. So maybe you could make the crosswalk possibly at North Pond itself, and then bring everybody to the south side of the road and just continue around to Cheshire Park. The sidewalk would be on the west side of the road at that point, if that was the case. But again, we'd have to make sure the grades work. You don't need some kind of retaining wall, or there's something crazy going on out there when we study a little more.
And for this year, your thought is to just do the planning for this year, the design for this year.
Yeah, I'd like to take the time and really do this. And we obviously want to meet with, have some kind of public information session with the folks in the neighborhood, make sure everybody's buys in, or at least hears the thoughts, and we hear their thoughts. And then we can come back to the council with kind of a much better idea and kind of a much better cost as well, just because we'll have an idea what we're looking at. And if the charge becomes to expand the scope, we can easily do that.
I would say there's definitely interest in this project.
Correct.
With our public hearing that we had. Horace?
Thank you. And George, thanks for bringing up the public hearing idea or some form of interaction with the people in that area. We did talk about this, and there were people in favor. There were one or two that had some concerns. I'm in favor of this. Obviously, this plays right into our plan of conservation and development for safety reasons, for connectivity. I think it's great. But obviously, I think we need to be very sensitive to the impacts that we may have on the properties where we're going to be doing this. And we did have at least one individual who was concerned about, being very close to her house. And I think there was a big tree there, or maybe even some walls that they were very concerned about. So I just want to make sure that as we're going through this process, that we're doing it right, and we're interacting with the homeowners there as best we can to let them know what we're doing, what we're trying to do, alleviate any fears they may have. And, even if they don't like it and we are going to go ahead and do it anyway, I want to make sure we're doing it as least impactful as we can to protect all of them. So I know you always do that, George, but in this case, we did have some comments on this. So I'm glad we're talking about it. Thank you.
Other comments or questions on this sidewalk project? All right, since we're ready to move on to the.
And if I could, I'll just close. And one of the reasons I'd like to delay this is I guess, what's the right term, not personal, but in my self-interest, we've, obviously Don Nolte is retiring, who's our engineering operations manager. So we're going to be a little light on engineering staff for the next few months until we hire an assistant town engineer. So that's another piece of this. We'd like to do this right and not have a bunch of hands in this and patch it together. So that's just one more reason to take another look at it for a while. The next one that comes up is road drainage improvements at 15 Rosalind Drive and 867 Farmington Drive, which is on page 201. And these are some, Rosalind Drive is kind of almost an MS4 stormwater disconnect, which is a good thing because again, the state's mandating that we disconnect stormwater discharging directly into water bodies where we can to promote more environmentally friendly runoff. And we have a situation at that location with an undersized system, and we'd like to put a new outlet pipe through the property into a basin that will kind of meter it out into the canal, Lock 12 area of the canal. And that's one part of this project. And the second part is on Farmington Drive. We have existing culverts under Farmington Drive, and we'd like to enlarge that and put a small box culvert in there. And the hope there is that we have stormwater discharge from Dryden Drive, which is parallel to Farmington, that goes out towards Farmington, but doesn't quite make it there because the grade changes and it goes uphill. And eventually we would like to push that drainage through Farmington and out to the canal in coming years. But that would be the first piece, is to get a larger culvert under Farmington so they can carry the water and we don't have it impound behind Norton School there in that area. So that's those projects.
Any questions or comments on that? All right.
Coming down the home stretch, there's
Yeah.
a lot of zeros here. One thing I'll just bring up is stormwater disconnects. That's showed as $110,000 next year, which is the second one from the top on page 189. We have an existing appropriation from the council for that, and the state has been very high on these MS4 stormwater disconnects for environmental quality of the water bodies in the state. And we have most of that money spoken for at this point. So if there's any ability to move that money up from year 2 to year 1, we could certainly make use of it, doing more of these disconnects and sampling of impacted drainage systems where there might be a pollutant of some type in the water, and we need to trace that back and make sure that that the entity causing it kind of ends that practice. So anything we could do, we would take, but I understand the budget is the budget, and we'll obviously work within that framework. And I'll just make my appeal for it. But as we go down, I think that's it. We had Scenic Court requested this year, and it was moved out to year 2. And similarly, the parking lot paving at Cheshire Park, the north parking lot specifically, that was moved to the next year, which is fine. We can certainly maintain those for another year or 2.
All right. Are there remaining questions, Mr. Jenks?
Yeah, just a quick question, George, on the Scenic Court project. So you're saying we moved that out to the next to 22, 23? Is that?
That would move out to 22, 23.
Okay. So 3,000 linear feet is Scenic Court's a pretty long road. How far does 3,000 linear feet get us?
That gets you probably 2/3 of the way, something like that.
Okay.
There's the section going in from Meriden Road that's it's something's moving around under there. We've had geoprobes done, and there's some, I'm going to call it unsuitable material under there that just is not standing up as it gets wet in the spring and stuff. The road starts to really move around on us. So the idea here is to strip off what's there and put a good base under it so that that road will last a long time. Alternately, and I try to always give you options where I can, we could mill and pave that road. I'm just not convinced that we'll get the life expectancy out of it that we'd all like to see. You know, we're not going to get 12 or 15 years out of that just because anytime that asphalt moves, it degrades dramatically. So that's,
But that part near Meriden Road is a pretty small section. That's not 3,000 linear feet.
that's going in from there.
Right.
Going in that far. And then it sort of tightens up as it climbs the hill there a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously you're the expert. It's otherwise, I think, in reasonably good shape, other than that part near Meriden Road, it seems like.
Right. The intersection itself is in terrible shape, as you say, but as you go in, you can see it's kind of rutted out as you drive down it. And that's a sure sign that there's an underlying problem under there.
Right.
But that road's an old road. I don't think it's pushing 25 to 30 years since it's been paved from memory. So it's been there a long time. And, you know, unless it's been overlaid at some point when that wasn't recorded in our records.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Other questions or comments on other items within this section? All right, then we move on to,
Sure. Water pollution control, that's on
That's right.
214. That'll give you the overview. And the good news here, again, is that there's just one item on this part. It's been skinnied up from the initial request. So the only item in year one is for heavy-duty vehicles and equipment. And if we go to page 217, that'll give you the detail. But there's three items that were requested in year one, which was the dump truck that hauls sludge to Synagro, the disposal site, a 600 kilowatt generator for the influent pump station, and a skid steer loader to replace the existing Michigan loader that's down there. The generator is the item that made it through for 150,000. So the influent pump station is where all the wastewater in town comes into the station, and it has a number of pumps there, and they're not powered directly by a generator, and it would be a good idea to obviously have those powered, because as that chamber fills up in a power outage, the more of the influent that you can move through the plant, the better it is. It doesn't remain in one place and pile up on you, so to speak. So that would be a great enhancement. And unfortunately, with the storms we've had in the last several years and the associated power outages for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, it's worth the effort to try to keep those pumps running and moving it through the process to treat the sewage through the plant.
questions and comments on their equipment? Mr. Orris?
Thank you. George, just to talk about the dump truck that didn't make it through. And I remember it was an older truck, but we refurbished it a few years ago. Was that worthwhile?
It was, and that's one of the reasons it moved out. That truck doesn't plow. Its sole purpose is to move material from A to B. So we refurbished it in 2017. So it's 4 years now, and I think we'll get another few years out of it. It's just an over-the-road truck like any other dump truck now.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Talbot?
So the request year one is for how much if the dump truck got moved out?
150. So the loader,
and
the
the-
skid steer and the dump
Both
truck
got moved
Yeah,
out.
correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you, George.
And the loader's old. It's a 1985 loader that we have down there, but it doesn't get a lot of hours on it. So it's reliable. We can get parts for it. So it's definitely needed when it's needed, to whether it's to move snow in there or you can pick up pump with it if you need to unseat a pump or something like that, but it's not a first line vehicle like a snow plowing issue or something like that, storm cleanup type machine.
And you said you have 2 backups
Correct.
over at the garage in addition to the frontline garage. Is
Correct.
that correct? So if you had an issue, you could move one over?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we could do that.
Very good. Anything else? All right. Then that's Public Works. We've got left for our next meeting, we could review public safety and finance and the capital non-recurring, where we plan to spend that.
Sure, and I think we're planning to hit Park and Recreation too. There's a couple items there.
Thank
in
you.
the
I
first
didn't
year.
write that
Yep.
note, but
Yep.
yes, thank you.
On
All
the,
right.
on
So
the
that's
22nd, I think. we've settled on.
22nd,
Yep.
right, so that's 2 weeks, all right. I would note, because we talked a lot about out years and some of the terminology, just for those that may be watching or whatever, just explain. It's a 5-year capital plan, and it lays out the expected expenditures of items that meet our criteria of capital, having a certain useful life, having a certain dollar amount, generally non-recurring in nature for the projects. The first year is the one that's actually appropriate. Years 2 through 5 are placeholders, our general order of magnitude, what we plan on working on, and year 2 and 3 are generally begun the designing and the planning in year 1 as we move along. So just so we understand that years 2 through 5 are placeholders, and they're important because they guide us going and the level of expenditures and what priorities we have. But year 1 is the one that really is the actual expenditure and spending on that. And any item that has a net cost to the town of more than $500,000 or cumulative net cost over the years of its cumulative projects needs to be a referendum question. There aren't, looking like what we've got here, probably aren't going to be too many, but
And I would just add and build upon what you just said, that the out years are also important, as Jim Jascott does his financial modeling, as we discussed a lot, and we will be next week during school modernization. Those placeholders are there, but also are real money for the purposes of projecting out debt service 20 and 30 years out. So they help us guide kind of what our affordability is. So.
good. All right. Other questions or comments? Then I'll hand it back to Mayor Orris.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Nowotny, for your time this evening. As Ms. Nichols said earlier, Public Works has their hands in so many different areas in this community. You're really kind of the heartline of so many different things. So, our deepest thanks to you and your department. I know everyone works really hard, from, the maintainers to the people in the office. I know you get some tough calls sometimes, and I think they handle them very professionally. So, our thanks for all of that hard work. But I also want to I know you don't like the public fanfare, but you're going to get a couple of seconds of it now because I think you deserve it. I've worked with you a number of years now, and you have a wonderful professional experience that you bring to the table, and that's great because we need that. But your personal demeanor is also outstanding. So for me, you're just a wonderful combination of both. We have what we need from an experience perspective, and you're a consummate professional. But your personal demeanor in all of our interactions is outstanding. And I just need you to know that I personally really appreciate that. I think the whole council does. Our community is much better for having George Nowotny at the helm of our Public Works Department. And I mean that from my heart. So.
Thank you. I'll try to take the compliment without a lot of back talk, but thank you. I'm fortunate to be surrounded by a number of great professionals, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
And you always say that, and you know what, the answer is perfect, but every once in a while you need to know how well appreciated you are, George. And I think it's important that, we have less interaction with people, beyond just kind of the department heads. We know what a great job they do, but we all interact a lot with the various department heads. And, I've really enjoyed our relationship over the years, and I think you do a great job representing our community. So I just wanted to take a minute to recognize you. Thank you.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to serve the community and this council and everybody else. Thank you.
Would you like a motion to adjourn?
I guess I got to get a motion to adjourn. Mr. Veliver, thank you. Ms. Pavano, seconded. All those in favor? Motion passed unanimously. They're here. Thank you all.
Walsh, too. Good. All right. Hope you're feeling better, Don.
Thank you, good night.
Good night.